Step number 2, I'm actually going to loop in. It's the rest of the pitch, right? So we've covered our introduction. Now we've got to talk about our problem, our solution, and our close. Right. The problem, the solution, the close. This is so powerful, and I've looped it all into one. Now, with this model, there's a lot of different ways that you can explain it, but I really love the idea of putting things in frameworks and undercomplicating them, making it something catchy and easy for you to understand and easy to explain to others. Now, one of the guys I've done business with, he runs teams down in Melbourne, which is, the opposite side of the country. But he's one of the most talented people I've ever worked with. And him and I just sat in a room one day, and sometimes you just get in a creative space and you just come out with genius. And so him and I worked together, and it just sort of flew out in the open. And ever since then, it's completely revolutionized the way that we teach sales to our guys. So I'm going to teach you this. It's very, very rare. You're not going to see this anywhere else. But this has led to our two businesses are now the 2 top agencies in the country. And so this is a really rare thing that I think you're going to get a lot out of. The model is called the 4 Fs, right? So the 4 Fs stand for, it's the framework, which is obviously what we're going to put the pitch into, so how to construct a good pitch, right? Then you've got the feelings, which is the emotional component of the pitch, right? Is being able to generate emotion and generate that leverage for a customer to go on and purchase something. You've then got the flow of the pitch, which basically is comprised of who is controlling the interaction, who is running the conversational frame, and also making sure that you're making it flow like a normal conversation should. And then finally, you've got the facts, which is obviously going to vary from product to product. So that's your 4F model right there. So it's the framework, the feelings, the flow, and the facts. And I'm going to walk you through each of these in a really, really easy to understand way. So this is your framework here. This is your 4F framework. This is your 4F model. So when we're looking at our traditional pitch model, which is intro, problem, solution, close, objection handles, consolidation, I'm going to cover the objection handling and the consolidation at the end. But to really get the core and the body of this pitch, understanding these 4 Fs is so powerful. The first thing, and when it comes to constructing a pitch, is the framework. Now, whenever I'm teaching something, I really like to dumb things down. I really like the notion of giving you a complex idea in the easiest way that you can possibly understand it. So even though we're talking intro, problem, solution, close, right, and we're talking about our 4F model, what we're really going to be talking about is emotion. Because every sale is leveraging emotion in one way or another, because that's what generates your desire to succeed. So if we look at our 4 Fs, so we've got our framework, we've got our feelings, we've got our flow, and we've got our facts. The first part, the framework here, we're going to look at that intro, problem, solution, close model, but we're really going to break it down into more. Now, like I said, if we're going to dumb it down, rather than saying a problem, right, what we really want to be dealing with is the emotion that we're talking about. So the introduction is going to stay the same, right? The introduction is going to, like I said, it's going to be broken into those 3 components. It's going to be your icebreaker. Draw my little ice cube here so that you can play along with it, right? You're going to have your rapport, and you're going to have your engagement. So that's your first part of the sales pitch, right? That's your first part here. But rather than a problem, what we really need to be doing is generating a negative emotion. We have to be attaching a negative emotion to the tension that we're trying to create. Now, when it comes to being able to get people to understand things, you can't just give someone one piece of information. You need what's called relativity, right? They need to be able to chain causality between 2 things. And then that's going to give them the part in their brain where they go, yeah, that makes sense. There's a trend. I'm going to action that. The problem is, how long do you think the average human attention span is? It's about 8 seconds. The average attention span for a human being goes for about 8 seconds. That's it. Women have a little bit more. Surprise, surprise, men have a little bit less. And understanding that is you gotta keep what we call keep it simple, stupid, or KISS your pitches. The last thing that you want is for it to be a kill pitch where it's keeping it long and lethal. A lot of times you can actually lose impulse and talk your way out of a sale if the customer starts to lose attention. So you want to be consistently, just as a rule of thumb, you want to be consistently checking in with them and asking if things make sense and asking if they're following along or asking if they need you to explain things in a different way. But as far as the framework itself is concerned, well, we obviously just need to use facts. If we're going to use facts, we're going to give them relativity. So we want to have at least two, but we don't want to have too many because then they're going to lose attention. So the model that I like to use, I give them a bad fact. I give them another bad fact. And this is where it gets really interesting. I ask them if it's bad. Like I said, I know this is explaining it very with lack of intellect here, but stay with me here. Right? So I give them a bad fact, I give them a bad fact, and then I ask them if it's bad. Well, I'm not actually doing that. I'm not actually doing that. But what I'm doing is I'm looking for them to agree with me here. And these yeses will come back and be a little bit more powerful moving forward. But if we're looking at this model, where we say bad fact, is that bad? I know it sounds ludicrous, but what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get this agreement out of them. I'm trying to get them to say yes. Because the moment that you agree with something, you feel right away. That's why if you look on like they do the Big 5 personality test in most psychological institutions. And they say, so what's your extroversion? Are you high extroversion or low extroversion? So are you an extrovert, are you an introvert? Are you, do you have openness to experience? Are you neurotic? Do you have high neuroticism or low neuroticism? And one of the big categories there is agreeableness. The other one's conscientiousness. So are you clean, or you're dirty, are you messy, are you a perfectionist, right? But the big one here is agreeableness. And what they tracked is people who are high agreeableness, who generally agree with lots of things, they are much more empathetic. There's just a natural tie. The moment that you agree with something, you feel that as well. You take on that emotion. Whereas myself, I'm only in the 3rd percentile of agreeableness, hence why I own businesses, because I'm a really bad employee. And so understanding that, if you really get your head around that idea, as soon as they agree, they feel. And so people like me who don't agree generally don't feel. I'm not a particularly empathetic person. I'm a very compassionate person, but I'm not someone that naturally goes, oh no, I feel your pain, I'm so sorry. It's like, I'm the guy that if you start crying in front of me, I don't know what to do, and I like try to pet you with a broom or something like that. And so that's what you're trying to do. You're getting them to agree. So you're providing relativity by providing 2 facts, and you're providing agreement by getting them to agree with you. That's where the emotion is going to come from. So the framework's already helping to embolden your pitch. Now we're going to turn it on its head. We've done the bad, we've done the problem, now we go to the solution. So what we're trying to generate is excitement. We're trying to get people excited, we're trying to make them feel good, we're providing relief. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to give them a good fact. Again, I'm getting relativity here, I'm going to give them a good fact. And then I'm going to ask them, is that good? Where they're going to say yes. Right? And lastly, when you hit the close, right? When you get to the close, like I said, the close is the most important, least important part. And what I mean by that is you can ruin your pitch with a bad close, but the secret to a good close is not trying to have a close at all. And so what you're trying to show here through this whole process is complete indifference. So you're going to give them a benefit, right? So I remember, we're still trying to generate impulse without trying. We're going to give them a benefit. And then we're going to basically, again, just get that agreement one more time. We're going to say, yeah, does that sound fair enough, or does that make sense, or does that sound good? Right. All right. There's all sorts of different tactics you can employ. One of my mates runs a really successful solar company, and his one is, you happy with that? He goes, you happy with that? And just assumptively gets them to agree. But all you're trying to get is just a base level of agreement, where you're not actually saying, cool, would you like to sign up to this thing for X amount per month for as long as, you're not making it committal, you're just making it easy. So now we're done with the framework. The framework's done. Congratulations, we're out of the way there, right? Now we talk about the feelings. And so obviously as a rule of thumb, if you're looking for the introduction, you're just trying to be confident and fun and add value. For the bad, obviously we're trying to generate negative emotion. For the good, we're trying to generate excitement and positive emotion. And for the close, we just want to be completely neutral. We almost want to be pitching it to them like we don't want them to buy it. Do it for whatever, X, Y, Z. It's this much. Yeah, does that sound fair enough? So you're almost downplaying it. But when we're looking at generating emotion, obviously we know from earlier, the question is going to generate a lot of emotion as is. But if someone's pitching you, imagine someone's trying to sell you something and they just start talking like this and speaking to you really monotone and being really boring. It's not going to do an awful lot for you, is it? It's not going to do anything for you. So what you have to be able to understand is the other ways that you can generate emotion. Well, how do we generate emotion? Well, it's actually really, really easy. Only about 20% of the conversation and the communication that humans have is verbal. 80% of human communication is nonverbal. It's like, well, what other ways can you be showing and telling people? Well, I'll give you a perfect example. It's the difference between going, oh, you're an idiot, or saying you're an idiot. So there's various things that imply, how to take something. And that's why you always get lost, you have the occasional text miscommunication where someone thinks that you're angry at them, but you're not, or vice versa. They're really, really, really powerful to be able to understand what else goes into communication. And there's really three things that you've got to focus on, right? Number one is your tonality, right? It's the difference between speaking monotone and being boring, or speaking with impact and purpose. Step number one. Step number two is your body language. I saw a really funny YouTube video, right? It was Donald Trump, and love him or hate him, up to you, right? But Donald Trump, he still managed to garner enough support to get elected president. But somebody had superimposed an accordion in between his hands for all of his speeches, and the way that he speaks, he's always speaking like this, and they made him right? And so understanding that when you're generating emotion using your hands and your body, that can actually inspire people a lot, and I'll show you how to do that as well. The last one, and it's one that you don't normally think about, is actually the first thing that babies learn how to take. Babies, from when you're an infant, it's the first thing that babies learn how to read. And it's not your tone, it's not your body language, it's actually your facial impressions, right? The expressions that you make with your face, or your facial expression, I should say. Your facial expression is so powerful. And it's just something that we all register without even meaning to. Now, I'm going to make this really easy because, like I said, I like making things really easy to understand. How do we crack tonality? Well, the secret to tonality, you don't have to be theatrical, right? Someone like myself, I'm a pretty high DI personality. I love being on stages. I love being able to converse and show passion. I'm quite loquacious and bombastic in the way that I speak. But not everyone might be that way. You might be someone who's very task-focused, or might be someone who's very introverted, and you don't like that idea of being so, out there and blatant in the way that you speak. You don't have to be a theatrical actor. You don't have to be a thespian, Shakespearean performer. What you have to understand is the concept of emphasis, right? Let's say I'll use my cancer example, right? So a cancer charity example. It's the difference of saying, look, 1 in 3 people will be diagnosed with cancer. Or saying, look, 1 in 3 people will be diagnosed with cancer. It's not about the tonality, it's about the emphasis. All you want to do is just not be monotone. If you can emphasize your buzzwords, it can really make a big difference, right? Let's say I'm selling, I'll use my knives example, right? And I know I'm talking low ticket here, but if I say, look, I can say, look, this is made with folded Danish steel, it's really good. I can tell you the exact same words. Look, this is made with folded Danish steel, and it's really good. So just being able to emphasize the points that you're making, I've never heard of folded Danish steel, I just made it up, but you get the idea, it's not about the tonality, and this is how you hack it. It's really about the emphasis. Right? Likewise, and now this one's really easy as well. How do we crack body language and how do we crack tonality? Because what's important here is if you're trying to generate emotion, you got to understand human beings are very, very naturally empathetic creatures. Like if you ever been around a friend or a friend or a family that's just negative and they're just sad all the time, how do you feel after spending an entire day around that person? right? It's draining, it's hard. Likewise, if you're around someone like me who's just full of energy or just has ADD, right? If you spend a whole day around a person like that, you're naturally gonna be charged up and have all that energy. We are really, really susceptible to what's around us, and we're naturally gonna feel what's with us. So if we're trying to generate emotion, and this is really important to understand, if I'm trying to generate emotion, what I really need to do is just show it myself. And especially if I've built enough rapport in the beginning of my thing where we're already got a lot in common, right? If I'm showing emotion, you're naturally gonna feel that emotion as well. So, if we're talking about body language and facial expression, it's actually the same hack for both. I want you to remember this one. Bad is small, good is big, right? So I'll do my little bad and I'll do my big good. Right? Bad is small, good is big. Let me give you a perfect example, right? Let's say I'm selling IT, or let's say I'm selling advertising. And I'll say, look, I could say it without it, right? So look, there's a lot of other competitors out here that aren't really doing much in the market, and they're costing a lot of money, right? They're bad facts that I'm using, right? But I'm not showing any negativity. But if I say, look, there's a lot of competitors out here that are really, they're not doing a very good job and they're costing businesses a lot of money. Look at my body language. My hands are in, my face is a little bit scrunched. That's all you have to do. If you want to demonstrate bad, you just don't be big and don't be out there. You want to be the opposite of what we're going to do for the good. So likewise, when I talk about my good facts, let's say I'm talking about my advertising strategy, and I say, look, some of the results that we've gotten for people have been amazing, right? And even if that's a bit too corny, you can just, let's say you're being more straightforward. I'm still using my body language. Look at my hands, look at my eyebrows, look at my face. I say, look, we've done a pretty amazing job. Some of our clients that we're working with have actually gone on to double and triple their revenue just from some of the ROI that we've been able to provide them. Pretty awesome, right? Notice I gave you a good fact, and I asked you if it's good, right? This is obviously, that's obviously a snapshot, something where it's a much longer, bigger ticket item. The sales process is going to be much longer. You're still going to follow these, but let's say hypothetically, so if I'm selling something like big advertising, I might have one meeting just for this introductory segment, right? Let's say they've come in as a warm lead. I've come in just to get to know them and ask them what their problem is and identify their problem. And then I'll have a separate meeting where I'll come in and I'll say, okay, so let's talk about the implications. So last time you told me your problem, let's talk about the implication of that. So you're losing money, and how's that affecting you? How's it affecting other parts of your life? Okay, so it's actually putting strain on your marriage. Okay, that's not very good. And what's the implication of that? So you're actually digging deeper and spending more time on these negatives. And then you go, okay, and what's something else? So okay, so the company that you provided promised you the world, and how'd that make you feel? And I go, it just got me off advertising. Okay, and what's the implication of that? If you can't advertise, what does that do for your business? Well, we're just relying on referrals and it's inconsistent. Okay, and what's the implication of that? So you're delving deeper into each segment. So don't just think this is for low ticket items. This works just as well for high ticket items, but you just have to understand you're gonna spend more time covering each topic, right? But where I'm talking about with emotions here, it's if I'm trying to generate good emotion, I'm gonna have big body language. My hands are gonna be out, I'm gonna be playing my Donald Trump accordion, right? And I'm gonna have a smile, my eyebrows are gonna be up. And when I'm talking about bad things, it's here. Now, what emotion should I be showing for the close? Well, like I said, you need complete indifference. They did a study at it was like an electrical goods store. And what they did, they had the control group, which were the normal staff, then they brought in paid actors. So half of the actors had to be really desperate and really need to sell this product. I think it was like a TV deal or something like that. And the other half of the actors had to pretend to be almost rude, like indifferent, like they don't care. And this is really cool. It was just a study on human psychology. Now, those actors who were paid to be desperate, who had to come in and be desperate, they ended up making 80% fewer sales than the normal control group, than the trained salespeople. But what was crazy about this is that the actors who got paid to be completely indifferent and not care, they actually ended up making 30% more sales than the people whose job it was to sell the stuff in the first place. And so this is a really good insight into sales, is understanding the power of indifference, understanding the power of I don't care if you buy it. Because the moment that I come across desperate, I go right back to losing my frame and being a salesperson and being someone who needs something from you. If I need something from you, you're not going to buy anything from me. Your loss is going to be my gain. But if I say it to you in a way that it's like I don't even care that you buy it, I'm actually valuing the product, because if I don't need you to buy it, subconsciously you're going to think the product must be pretty good. Where if I need you to buy this product, subconsciously you're going to think that product isn't very good. So understanding the power of indifference, it's just like a whatever. It's like, yep, cool. You can break it down. It's 4 easy payments, $99.99. You've got a 3-year, warranty guarantee. You have any issues, come back here. But honestly, look, it's a really good TV. You're going to have an amazing time, and I think it's going to be great in the living room. Fair enough? Beautiful. So you can close with that indifference, and that's where you can get assumptive. So just to recap, small is bad, big is good. And your close just has to be super neutral, like you don't care. So that is our feelings done and dusted. Next up, right? We've got our flow. Now the flow is broken down into 2 components, right? The flow is broken down into 2 components. Number one, it's about understanding how to control the interaction, which comes down to the conversational frame, right? Likewise, you also have to make it flow like a normal conversation. And I'm going to cover both of those elements, right? The first part, the idea of a conversational frame, it's people can infer different things from the same interaction. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's use our Donald Trump example, right? So he in his first day as president of the United States, the first thing he did was crack down on banking regulations, where the global financial crisis happened because the big banks were giving out home loans and mortgages to people who couldn't pay them, and they were defaulting at an alarming rate. The first thing he did was make it harder for banks to give mortgages out to people who didn't quite qualify. The very next day, there were 2 newspaper headings, right? All the right-wing Donald Trump supporting papers said, Donald Trump takes a stand against big banks, right? But that same action garnered a different result from the left-wing newspapers. And they all said, Donald Trump makes it harder for the average American to have the American dream of owning their own home. Same action, 2 different frames. It's the same as if I were to go, oh, you're an idiot. And someone who was watching, goes to their friend and gossips and goes, he looked at him and he said, you're an idiot, right? Putting a frame on an interaction is so powerful. And so when we're talking about sales, the frame's super important. The way that we can control an interaction is so important. And the strength comes from the assumptions. How you can control a frame, how you can control the frame of an interaction. Let's say a perfect frame is, I'm not a salesman. The person wants to impose a frame that I'm the salesman, but I'm going, nah, I'm not a salesman. Well, whoever is more certain will control that frame. The beauty of sales, though, is that if we're using a consistent pitch and we're using the same pitch every time, well, if I've gone through this pitch 100 times and you've never been in this pitch, I'm naturally going to be more confident and more assertive. So I've already got the high ground and the advantage on my side. But really, when we're looking at the assumptions, and because the assumptions are what make the frame, it's going to come on the questions and the agreement. We're almost going to use the Socratic method here to get them to agree to the frame that we want. A good example I love, there was a movie called Thank You for Smoking. I really enjoyed it. And they was talking about the political lobbies for the tobacco industry. And he was talking to his son, and his son says, hey, Dad, how are you right all the time? And he goes, son, I don't have to be right. I just have to make you wrong. And so he talks about the example. He goes, son, I'll give you an example. What's your favorite ice cream? And the son goes, cookies and cream. He goes, hey, so you'd say that cookies and cream is the best flavor of ice cream? He goes, yeah. So cookies and cream is better than all the other flavors of ice cream. And he goes, yeah. So you, as someone who likes cookies and cream, think that you're better than than the people that don't? That's not very good. And he goes, and that for me was this big light bulb moment of, that's what frame is. That's how I can explain frame. Is the assumptions that you put on the yes is what's going to carry you through. So I've got such a soft spot in my heart for fundraising. So I'll use an example here of a charity pitch and just go along with me here. Let's say I'm trying to bring out a new treatment, right? So I'm going to say, look, 1 in 3 people will be diagnosed with cancer. Unfortunately, remember, I'm using my tone. I'm not saying 1 in 3 people will be diagnosed with cancer. I'm using my body. 1 in 3 people will be diagnosed with cancer, right? Unfortunately, over 50% of people who die from cancer are actually dying from the treatments, not the cancer itself. I'm sure you'd agree that needs to change, right? Well, they're saying, yes, that needs to change. But from that, yes, I'm making a reasonable assumption. I'm assuming that they're saying, yeah, we should do something about it. Well, if they've agreed that it's something that needs to change, is it a reasonable assumption for me to assume that they would want to do something about it? Absolutely. So I'm putting certainty on my assumption that they're going to want to do something about it. And then let's say I go into my good bit, right? So I say, look, so we brought out this amazing new treatment. Basically what we're doing, we've figured out how to get the white blood cells doing all the work for you, right? So people aren't getting sick or losing their hair from things like chemo, but more importantly for kids where cancer is more aggressive, they get a chance to go back to the footy field, back to school, chance to be a kid. I'm sure you'd agree that's amazing, right? And so if they say, yeah, that's amazing, well, they're saying, yes, that's amazing. But really, what I'm assuming that they're saying is, well, yeah, how do I help? Because if they're saying it's amazing, I can assume that they would want to help reasonably, right? And so when I get to the close, and let's say I'm looking for ongoing support. So that's awesome. So it works out to something small around $1 a day, so $35 a month. You just do it for as long as you can, but we're aiming for sort of 2 years or more. It's all tax deductible, so you can get a bit back from the government. But honestly, one less cup of coffee a week, you're going to be changing people's lives forever. Does that sound fair enough? Now this is a complete hypothetical. I'm just sort of spitballing with you. But does that sound fair enough? And they go, yeah, that sounds fair enough. Well, they're saying, yes, that sounds reasonable, but I'm reasonably assuming that what they're saying is, yeah, cool, sign me up. And that's where the assumptive close comes in. That's where you can be assumptive with your close, because if they said yes, and you've got that momentum on your side, they're more likely to want to sign up, right? So that's just a hypothetical example. And that can work with anything. Let's say you've got any sort of product. Let's say I'm talking about advertising again. So look, works out to we do 30% of ad spend of our ad spend that we're going to be working with, minimum $500 a month. If we're going to build the website for you, we do expect that you help for 12 months. Obviously, we have to take the website down. Makes sense? Beautiful. But the other benefit is we give you, this much tracking. We give you cost per click. We give you all the ways and metrics that you're going to be able to see it that you're not going to be able to get with the competitors. But honestly, look, if what you've said with your goal is that you want to be able to achieve this much target, I'm absolutely confident that we can help you do that. Does that sound fair enough? So you've got your close is you're hitting your benefits, properly, but it's the assumption when they say yes, that really carries you through. And so that's one of the most important parts of sales, is really understanding how to control that frame. Now, the other part of that interaction, right, is how do you make it flow like a conversation? How do you stop yourself from being cheesy? Well, it's really easy. What does this mean when I put a question mark there? Well, if you're asking somebody a question, it means that you need something from them in response, right? You need a response from them. Well, anytime you need a response from somebody, anytime you need something from someone, what should you be showing? Indifference. So where a really corny salesperson will go, I'll use my fundraising example again. I say 1 in 3 people will be diagnosed with cancer. Unfortunately, over 50% of these people who are dying from cancer are dying from the treatment of the cancer itself. I'm sure you'd agree that's terrible, right? It sounds really corny. But watch, I'll do the same level of emotion, even if it's like corny emotion. I can keep the emotion for this, but I'm going to change the emotion in the question. Look, 1 in 3 people will be diagnosed with cancer. Unfortunately, over 50% of the people that are dying from the treatment are dying from the cancer. Dying from the cancer or dying from the treatment itself. I'm sure you'd agree that needs to change, right? So see how on the question, I'm sure you'd agree that needs to change. It doesn't. I'm not needing anything from you. That's the secret to making it flow like a normal conversation. Now, a lot of people, especially in low-ticket sales, so something like charities or electricity or something where it's a much quicker sales process, you're going to get people talk over you, and so a lot of people neglect to ask the yes questions, even though you really need to, especially on phones and things like that. You have to be able to control this frame. But a lot of people neglect to ask these questions because a lot of times the customer will run away with the interaction. I'll go, I'll tell you, something about, I'm sure you'd agree that needs to change. And someone goes, yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. My uncle had to deal with the same thing, but his wife, she was a real piece of work, and she actually used to collect parrots. And I don't know if you've seen parrots, but these things were like really, really big. She had some macaws as well, so that's the blue ones and the red ones. And all the red and blue, it used to, the conversation's all the way over here now. I'm trying to have this conversation, and you've brought it all the way over here. Well, the secret to that is actually really easy. There's one word that can just solve any problem. Anyway. You can literally just let them talk themselves out and go, yeah, cool, just nod, listen. Yeah, cool, awesome. Anyway, and then you can bring it right back to your sale here, right back to where you were. Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, he has that straight line persuasion system. And I'm not infringing on any copyrights here, but he talks about bringing it back to the sale. And in sales, especially the bigger ticket, the more expensive it is, they're going to naturally run away from where you want it to be. The secret to bringing it back to the sale is anyway. Just ask them anyway. So that's super powerful. Now, one trick that really works well in low ticket, so if you're selling something that's like under $500, right? When you teach a dog how to sit, how do you do it? Right? When you teach a dog tricks, how do you do it? I've got a beautiful Swiss Shepherd, so like a white German Shepherd, best dog in the world, right? And when I would teach him how to sit. What would I do? Well, I'd go sit, and he'd go, and then what would I do? I'd give him a treat. You give him that treat right away. They do it with dolphin training as well, but because dolphins, they actually use clickers under the water because the response has to be so quick that so they know that they've gotten it. So as soon as they hear the click, they go, oh, okay, now I get fish, and then they'll swim over and get their fish. But if you give someone a reward for agreeing with you, you're building what's called conditioning. You're conditioning a behavior because it gives them a little hit of dopamine, and it makes them want to do that more without even realizing it. So if I say, I'm sure you agree that needs to change, and they go, yeah, or let's say that they're bringing in like a white goods, like a toaster or something. It's like, I'm sure you agree you can do a better toaster than what you've had, right? They go, yeah. Beautiful. Look, you're talking to the right person. This is great. Great. You're not a monster. I'm happy to give you the time. When you give them a reward, which can literally just be as simple as energy, where you just go, awesome, or that's great. What you're doing is you're conditioning them to say yes. So by the time you say, awesome, so just whatever, Visa, MasterCard, just whatever card you want to get, they're not going, they're going, okay, yeah, just let me grab it for you, right? So establishing that conditioning is one last really powerful part of controlling the frame that I think that really, really is going to help. Now, that's definitely the bulk of the concept of the core here. But when you're really talking about, so we're good for flow here. There's one last component that's really important, and it's your facts, right? The thing about the facts, and what's really good about that is if it's something low ticket, when you're learning a new pitch, let's say you're learning a new item, you just have to plug 4 different facts in. You only have to change a couple. But why it's so important, and we put it at the end, is when you're dealing with something that's high ticket, right? Or even something that's medium, even things like fashion and things like that, you gotta know what you're talking about. You have to know what you're talking about. And so when you're talking about something like IT or software, if you're dealing with a business owner who knows more about the industry than you do, you're already at a disadvantage. That's why it generally takes account managers and people that are in those higher ticket things. It's a much more difficult learning process because it takes a long time to memorize that. So don't be scared to go and learn every single detail you can. Remember, people have a short attention span, so you don't want to bombard them with information just because you know it. But if somebody asks a question and your answer is let me find out, or worse, your answer is I'm not sure, you've just lost that sale. So you need to be armed with all the facts that you can in order to get this through. So plugging your facts in here is very, very important, but also knowing the answers to the question so that they can perceive you as an expert. Because if they don't perceive you as an expert, you've lost your credibility. Well, credibility is just trust. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to buy from you. So that's our 4S model. It's honestly one of the most revolutionary, powerful things that you can learn in sales. And that's our intro, our problem, our solution, and our close already done. But there are still just 2 more things that we can cover.